Hey, my name is Levi Bullock. I'm a longtime musician and a guitar teacher, and I wanted to tell you today why I've never really gotten into distortion pedals. I've got like all these overdrive pedals, and I've been like somewhat low-key obsessed with overdrive pedals for my entire duration of my guitar playing career, if you could call it that. And I recently watched this video from Rhett Scholl about the DS1. Now, honestly, I've never plugged into a DS1. I've never played a DS1. There's a bunch of different distortion pedals on the market, and I've actually never messed around with them. So I thought it might be interesting if I show you exactly how I use the amp and why I've never found a need for a distortion pedal. However, I also wanted to make the case for distortion pedals and kind of show you how and why they can be really great and useful as well. Basically, my regular guitar tone is like this, there's not a whole lot of gain there. But it's also not a clean tone by any means, like if you start strumming chords. It's basically too distorted for strumming chords, right? And technically, you could probably roll it down. But, the main sound has some distortion on it. When you have an overdrive pedal, you can take this already somewhat distorted sound and push it even further. And that's what I'm gonna do with this little Ibanez TS7 tube screamer. Then with the overdrive. Right, so there's not a whole lot of gain on there. We've only got a little bit of drive put in there, but I've put the level up all the way to boost the volume into the input of the amp. Basically, that drives the preamp a little bit harder, and it gives this kind of amp saturation sound. Let me play a little bit more with that, Right, and then, without the drive, so it makes kind of a world of difference there, but at the same time, you can make a lot higher gain of a sound with that too, just by turning up your amp gain a little bit. Now, it gets pretty noisy when you start turning up the gain quite a lot, but that's where you start to get into that crushing territory where even with a vintage style amp, and a vintage style overdrive, you can still get a lot of gain out of it and sound really kind of rock and roll. And I really like that functionality that the overdrive gives you, basically taking a distorted sound and pushing it even further to get more distortion out of it. Let's take a quick look at the only distortion pedal I own so I can kind of show you how it differs in the way you use it. Okay, so we've got the distortion pedal plugged in now, but in order to get this to actually work properly, I have to use a clean tone on the amp. And that's what I'm talking about when I say it totally changes the way we have to use the amp, right? So I'm used to using more of a distorted channel most of the time, and then I'll use the overdrive to push even further and get even more saturation, right? But some players with some amps will actually have to use a totally clean amp and then use a distortion pedal to get most of their gain from, right? In my opinion, the number one reason to use a distortion pedal is to basically give you something different than what your amp can do on its own. All right, so we got a basic clean tone on here. Right? Now, there's a lot of dynamics on that clean tone. If I strum a little bit harder, it goes way louder, right? So let's take a look at how this distortion sounds. Now with that already, it cleans up a lot of those dynamic differences. It really brings it a lot closer together in terms of what the loudest and the softest sound is. And it gives us way more gain than the overdrive pedal even can do. It also gives us a lot more saturation at a controlled volume, which I think is really cool with the distortion effect, because you can keep this at a reasonable volume level, but you can get a lot of crushing saturation out of it. Whereas with the overdrive pedals, you basically have to push the volume to get the natural overdrive distortion that you get from that type of pedal and gain structure. So when it comes to these two different types of pedals, I think that they're both really, really cool and they both have a lot of utility, but they totally do different things. Overdrive is a lot more of a subtle effect where you can get a little bit of gain, a little bit of distortion out of it, but it really shines when you're using it to boost a already distorted sound. As for the distortion pedal, I think it really shines when you use it on a clean tone or something with really low gain, so you can get most of your gain from the distortion pedal. So basically what this pedal is doing is it's providing us a lot more gain, a lot more distortion and saturation straight from the pedal, and that way we're not having to rely on the amp so much. Now, in my journey as a guitar player, I've always been lucky enough to have an amp that I really like the distortion sound on, and then I've used the overdrive pedal to kind of push that even further. However, some amps don't have a great distortion sound, right? In that case, using a distortion pedal is basically the right move, right? So it's not to say that one is better than the other. I think that they both have their use, and it just depends on kind of what amp you have and what kind of style of music that you play. And that's why I personally always chose to get overdrive pedals rather than distortion pedals, because I never really felt the need to get that whole different channel until much later when I was playing really heavy music. So anyways, that's kind of my take on the matter. That's my little story in terms of the gear and why I've chosen to typically use overdrives. However, as time goes on, my perspectives are continually changing, right? And I'm always trying new things and trying to keep an open mind. And that's what I encourage you to do when it comes to gear and equipment. Basically, try stuff, see if you like it. Don't let other people's opinions really kind of sway you. Like, really, it's ultimately up to you on what you like in your guitar sound. But anyways, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks so much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. So yeah, please do that. And let me know if you have any comments, questions, leave it in the comments below. And until then, I've got to run, catch you later, and maybe check out this next video here, and I'll see you next time.